Welcome to the Into the Wilderness podcast. I'm your host, Timothy Regal. I have with me today Joseph at Masculine Theory. He is a men's performance coach and author of Sexual Energy Mastery. He works to help men break free from addiction, reclaim their power, and make money online. Joseph, welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
What an introduction, Timothy. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah, great. And I appreciate you joining us from the UK as well, and bridging our time difference here to have a chat. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been good. It's amazing the kind of community that we've built on Twitter and the amount of connections we're able to make over the pond. It's a crazy world we live in.
Absolutely, it is. I mean, I've made some great friends on Twitter and Instagram, and they always say it's, you should never meet people up online or talk to strangers online. But man, honestly, Some of my best friends now are people I met online. So happy to call you one of them.
Perfect, man. So you too.
We both kind of work in this field of kind of, I don't know what the proper term is, but it's in the sexual field of men's sexuality. I work as a porn addiction coach and helping men break free from porn addiction, and you do a lot of the same thing. I think we both found that very few men today have much, if any, control over their sexual desire. We see, numbers show up, even up to 2/3 of men are addicted to porn. Men will do all kinds of things in order to get laid, that everything just becomes, they have no control over their sexuality, and they're completely, their lives are determined by it. So you talk about mastering a man's sexual energy. What does it mean? What does that mean?
What does it mean to master your sexual energy? Well, I think first and fundamentally, it is emotional control. I think what the consistent variable is in both of our coaching, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we don't want to treat the symptoms of what is manifesting itself as a consequence of, past trauma or things like that. But it's emotional control, which has always been at the helm of every single bad decision that I've ever made in my life. And perhaps that might be the same for yourself.
Absolutely.
And the kind of key lesson, the key premise in mastering your sexual energy is, and you'll hear me say many of the trite tweets that I say, like, don't quit porn, just learn how to control your emotions, things like that. Because we are so detached from the language of the body, essentially, which is emotions. So when I say master your sexual energy, I'm talking about mastering our emotions. What is emotions? Energy, emotion, energy in motion. And as I kind of preface, every single bad decision that you've made when you've gone to watch these dirty videos online, where you've lashed out at a colleague at work, could be anything, comes at the root cause of not understanding your emotions, either repressing them, suppressing them, or pushing them into a form of escapism, which is typically what we see in going online and watching dirty videos, drinking alcohol, doing drugs. Could be funneled into any other kind of thing, but that I think is the most important principle that I would convey to anybody who asked me that question. It's, do I understand the language of my body? Am I seeing it as an objective thing? I'm not placing my subjectivity on it. I'm not condemning the fact that I'm a human being and actually have a sexual identity, and I have these innate feelings, and to not reprimand them when they arise, just allowing them to be there, and then allowing that emotion to dissipate and transmutate it into higher things, which I'm sure we'll get into in a moment.
Sure. So it's not so much that we have to master our sexual desire, it's that we have to master the emotions behind the sexual desire and what the emotions lead to.
Exactly that.
Yeah. Because I see that same thing. One thing I say all the time, one of my favorite tweets is porn addiction, sexual addiction isn't about pleasure, it's about pain. We're either trying to cope with some pain in our life or run away from it. Porn porn is an addiction, yes, but it's not just a bad habit. It's a bad coping mechanism.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
it's how we learn to deal with those emotions.
That's the escapism element. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's how I break down in my coaching when I deal with men is, okay, what's behind it? Isn't that men are just hornier than everybody else or have a higher sex drive. They're using this as a Band-Aid or as an escape or whatever from all these emotions, and breaking down those emotions is how we find that root cause, that disease, instead of treating the symptoms.
There we go.
Right.
Perfect.
So why are men so bad at dealing with their emotions, and then it leads to sexual issues or porn?
Well, fundamentally, we've never been taught. I mean, there's a trite idea of emotional intelligence that many people would have heard. I think that term is becoming maybe a little bit overused and isn't really getting to the root cause of it. But I think my understanding of it goes a little bit into kind of the religious and more spiritual realm of what I believe we are and how I believe we should articulate ourselves through the world as a consequence of knowing that. So it first comes to understanding that we are not our emotions. Many people believe that we are our emotions and that we are our thoughts. But in actual fact, you are, I mean, if you're going to ask me personally, I would say that we are first and fundamentally a soul. Other people in other different religions may call it the Atman, the Pneuma, the witness, the observer in psychology. Use whatever term is most comfortable to you. But if you are proficient in self-reflective practices, you will come to a realization that you have a body, you have a mind, and you have those tools available to you to use. And the pain and suffering arises when you believe you are depression, when you believe you are anxiety, when you believe you are stress, and not seeing them as a separate thing that you can watch, and you can almost, from the perspective of a stranger, watch it pass by the street. Or one analogy I like to use is if you are in your own house and a stranger knocks at your door and you look through the keyhole and it's depression, don't open the door and entertain depression. And that's where the identification comes from with these emotions. So loneliness is a big one with men, and using porn as an escapism route, and not having a close friend maybe to talk to, or even a partner to be able to transmute some of those emotions. But instead, loneliness is let in through the door, and then you start to identify with it, and it spirals into lower and lower negative emotions. So to come back to the root of your question, why are men having so much trouble controlling their emotions? It's the absence of self-reflective practices that allow you to speak the language of the body. And that's why I promote so heavily on my Twitter, on my YouTube, meditation, fasting, journaling, exercise. All of these things are a form of meditation, a form of self-reflection, a form of talking to yourself, again, looking at those emotions objectively and finding out the root cause of them. And those practices put you more into the perspective of the witness that I talked about earlier. This idea that when I'm sitting quietly by myself, simply breathing and watching what thoughts arise into me, it's almost, you experience that fragmentation of, oh, that's interesting how I thought about an old ex-girlfriend that broke up with me or cheated on me, and how that's now presenting itself as the emotion of loneliness inside me, and how I can see that temptation to deal with that certain negative emotion by going to my computer, finding a dirty video, and experiencing pleasure to escape that particular emotion. So I think that, Well,
I think, I don't know if I do think it's a societal thing that's happened. I've seen it happen more over the past 10 to 15 years, I would say, this concept of making these emotions, making these syndromes your identity.
Yes,
So what
yes.
came out of I think that came out of a good thing of trying to remove stigma from mental illness, from depression, from anxiety, from all these different things. You know, I think there was a good faith effort to remove that stigma because it was something that used to be hidden. But I think it's gone too far the other way now that, oh, I'm depressed, I have bipolar disorder, I have this, I have that, I have X, whatever. And that becomes a part of a person's identity, where that's how they identify themselves, as I am this disease, this disorder, this whatever. And so they're taking on those emotions as part of their inner being.
Yeah. And those are often the most difficult clients to work with, and the most difficult people to maybe even, I mean, I don't want to say try and help, because those are the most, it's like those people don't even want to help themselves because they're so ingrained into their own story, and they're not open to the idea that those stories that they tell themselves become their reality, and it becomes such a tangled web to try and save someone, because that's probably the most painful thing to see, when you see someone self-perpetuating their own negative story that becomes their identity and will eventually become their destiny, unless they can have that again space where they can see it as something separate to themselves.
Yeah, they take it on as all their identity. And I think it's to your point that you mentioned earlier about having self-reflection. I think that they can say, hey, this is me, I'm depression, I'm this is the reason I'm having the problems I have, instead of facing themselves in the mirror and facing the real them and dealing with the person looking back at them. It's a way to shift that responsibility.
Yeah.
From you to somebody else.
Well, it's easier that way. It's easier that way. It's more comfortable that way, because once you're in that particular position, you're in hell, you're suffering, you're experiencing pain. And, speaking from my own experiences, when I was the lowest that I've ever been, is you can see that temptation of that idea as an easy way out, of kind of fobbing off responsibility and putting it all on this idea that you have been victimized by some thing that is completely out of your control, and escaping that particular hole is it's the hardest thing that I've ever done. But
me too.
It makes you the person you are, but not a lot of people survive. They really don't.
Right. So how do we gain that control? How do you stop avoiding yourself and actually start having that self-reflection, that self-awareness, doing that meditation, spending that time with yourself and with facing your own thoughts, your own feelings, and coming to terms with them instead of running away from them? How do you do that?
That's a good question. I think it's easy for me to say, oh, just meditate, oh, just fast, oh, sure, just journal. But I really believe that the way, more specifically Western culture, is kind of organized, is that there's so much distraction, there's so much temptation. Believe me, it's not organized in a way that is for your benefit. And you have to realize that, and you have to scrutinize your environment very, very heavily. And one of the things I did when I was at that point is I wrote down almost like a day-to-day time slot of what I was doing, and I identified everything that wasn't being conducive to my growth. So too much consumptive habits. You're going to hear me say so many trite tweets in this, but the key to your suffering isn't addition, it's subtraction. Take things away. You don't need as much as you're taking in. Quit the entertainment, quit with the YouTube, the Netflix, the Amazon Prime, the Disney. There's so much now. And move more consciously towards those self-reflective practices. Spend more time alone, I would say. All these things are designed to take you away, again, an escapism, to take you away from that pain. It's amazing, and how it's amazing and scary how people are just afraid of being by themselves. They always need to talk to
yeah.
someone, or they need some kind of filler.
Some noise.
Yeah, some of my clients can't sleep and they have the TV on in the background. They can't sleep without the TV on.
Right.
And when you look at that objectively, if you were to diagnose that as a GP, a psychologist, what is that saying? Is that saying that you're essentially trying to cover something up, and you don't want to hear, the noise of your thoughts, maybe the condemnation that's happening there. But it's in order to get out of that apathy, you need to do that deep work. And it's not a one-time only thing. It's a practice that will be with you for the rest of your life. It's something that I still do now, even though I'm in a much better position than I was maybe 5 years ago. So I wake up in the morning and go for a morning walk without my phone. Just take a walk around the park, come back. I do a little brain dump of all my thoughts in my journal, and then I just sit for 30 minutes and just allow what thoughts, what emotions to rise out, and just watch them like clouds floating by. I'm not identifying with them. I'm not the cloud. I just watch them. If there's one practical piece of advice that you can take and immediately implement into your life from that little monologue there, it would be writing. Just journal. And you'll be amazed how clear your thinking gets when you actually put them on paper.
Right. That's something I push a lot in my coaching as well, as journaling. And I tell a lot of guys too, so many men are hesitant and apprehensive about journaling. And I think some of that comes from, we equate journaling with like a, 15-year-old girl's diary.
Yeah.
And there's kind of this like feminine aspect to it. But when you look throughout history, most men kept journals, and that's where we have a lot of our history from, is the journals of famous men. So, and I tell guys, it doesn't have to be a narrative. It doesn't have to be Dear Diary today, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It could just be tracking your progress. Today was a good day. Here are 3 wins I had today. Here's 1 or 2 things that I should improve on tomorrow. Just kind of letting those thoughts out instead of trying to bottle everything up makes a huge difference in this progress.
That's great. That's great.
There's a term that you've used already here and you use in your program as well. It's called, you say it's sexual transmutation. What does that term mean?
So sexual transmutation is the art of, so I'll tell you a little story which may explain this a little bit better. But the one thing that kind of just, you ever get those aha moments where things just click into place, where you realize when you're studying like a particular piece of your literature, or maybe 2 books, and they click together. The aha moment for me was this, I believe, I'm going to get this wrong now. It's either the first or second law of thermodynamics, is the idea that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. When I heard that, I thought, well, what does that mean? Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only transform. And I sat with this for days. You can't create energy. It can only be transformed from the source, which is the sun. So light comes down into the food we eat, you take it into the body, which creates the kinetic movement of our physical bodies, allows us to exercise, allows us to breathe. And then it's a cyclical process, like the water cycle. The act of me knocking on my desk here is a transmutation from the sun into the food, into my body, into my movement of my arm to make that noise. Sexual transmutation is the recognition that the body will prioritize the organization and reproduction of your sexual fluid above all things. It's the most valuable fluid your body can produce. Why is it? Because you have 2 prime direct functions as a creature of this earth, and that is to eat, to sustain the survival of the individual, and that is to have sex to ensure the survival of the species. So it's quite poetic. It's the individual must survive and everyone else has to survive. You are governed by these laws above all things. So when you're conserving your sexual fluid and not jerking off every day, not releasing that vital essence, you are no longer taxing your body, your nervous system to every night having to replace, oh, he's jerked off again. We need to get more sexual fluid, because, you know, if we need to reproduce, remember, the body isn't rational in that fact. It doesn't know that there's 7 billion people living on Earth. All it knows is, I need to have sex to ensure that we don't die out. Sexual transmutation is the recognition of this idea, not taxing the nervous system and using that energy to fuel other pursuits. And this could be in the form of what I believe is the natural creative personality of human beings. Because I don't believe that or the average man is very, very creative, especially when you start incorporating the pornography addiction. It doesn't even need to be pornography addiction, but every average man my age, or maybe even your age, is out there trying to chase some kind of tail, is on Tinder, is on Hinge. Mm-hmm. And he feels that pull, he feels that strong energy. You and I feel that strong energy. We recognize it. It is the most potent energy there is in the human experience, your sexual impulse. So I ask my clients and ask people who are skeptical and say to me, you know, what's all this bullshit you're talking about, sexual energy mastery, sexual transmutation, is, could you believe how powerful you were or you are if you harnessed that impulse and you actually used it to start your own business, maybe actually pursue a genuine relationship based on reciprocity and not sexual pleasure, on developing a social circle, friends, serving your community? What could you do if you weren't wasting all of that into needless pleasure?
Right.
I could talk a while on this subject.
Yeah. So it's not that when you're watching porn, masturbating, like you say, chasing tail, whatever, trying to get laid, you know, all these things. It's not that we're just wasting time, wasting money in a lot of cases, running away from everything. We're actually wasting physical energy, chemical energy in our bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when we can harness that into something positive, then it's not, again, it's not just that you're, like how you said it, it's not adding, it's taking away. So we're taking away all those wasted things and repurposing that energy into something positive.
Exactly that. Yeah. The power to create another human being. Can you imagine that power? When you actually think very deeply on that idea, you have within you the power to create another human being with its own hopes and dreams, with its own aspirations, to build his own family, his own businesses, to affect his community, sitting in your loins. And that you squander that potential into 2-3 seconds of pleasure.
Yeah.
When you rationalize it, it doesn't make any sense.
Sure. Something that you hear about a lot, kind of and along these lines in the manosphere, I guess, that you and I are kind of a part of. Something you hear about a lot is the term semen retention. So for listeners, can you explain what that is and what the benefits of that are?
So I think this is a nice kind of segue from, I suppose, sexual transmutation would be the end goal of semen retention. But
sure.
In kind of layman's terms, semen retention is this idea, again, that you have within you the creative capacity to create human life. And if you conserve that energy, if you're not wasting it through masturbation, ejaculation, or even sex, could just be regular sex, you will actually start to experience a number of unique and powerful benefits that you had no idea that you had. It's something that I personally practice. There are ways to do this even if you have a partner. Some people call it the more extreme version of NoFap. You would have heard this community NoFap within the manosphere as well, which is simply not masturbating, but still having full-on intercourse and ejaculating with a partner. But semen retention is the extreme end of that, is no seminal emissions whatsoever, regardless of sexual intercourse.
So, and are there examples of how men can do that, or how you can have these non-ejaculatory orgasms? Because, we want to harness our sexual energy, and I'm married. I've been married for 13 years. I have sexual desire for my wife, and it's not that it's semen retention, NoFap. It's not an abstinence. I think we should specify that.
Yes. So semen retention is not celibacy. Celibacy, the difference between the two terms is that you cannot permit in sexual intercourse while you're celibate.
Right.
So in regards to your previous question about practices, the term you're looking for in regards to making this let's say a practical and feasible in your particular life, is a practice called Kareza. Kareza is I believe it's derived from the word caress, and it means a kind of slower, more intimate form of intercourse with your partner. The end goal not being ejaculation, but pair bonding. See, this is another catastrophic misinterpretations of the functions of sexual intercourse that is plaguing modern Western culture, is this idea that you have to have an orgasm in order for sexual intercourse to be let's say a complete practice. Sure. There are two functions for sexual intercourse, and one is procreation, the other is pair bonding. You can pair bond and not procreate. And the difference between those two is the chemicals dopamine when you ejaculate and you experience orgasm in order to create a family. And the second chemical you're looking at is oxytocin, which is the pair bonding chemical that actually strengthens the relationship between your partner. And this is a practice that I do personally with my girlfriend. It's something that is extraordinarily beneficial to both of our lives, because again, it's not focused on this idea of what can I get from you? What is the pleasure that you can give me? What is the end goal? It's about spending time together, intimacy, cuddling, connecting, pair bonding. And I believe, and this might be bold of me to say, in light of maybe other people's experiences in sexual relationships, but it doesn't take a genius to kind of look at the statistics of monogamous relationships in the 21st century and know that they're in the toilet.
Right.
There is strong evidence that suggests that the frequency in which you experience the first type of sexual intercourse with your partner, so procreation, even if you're using contraception, has a biological effect on both of your bodies, that you have successfully impregnated your partner, and you will begin to experience sexual satiety. So you'll begin to get bored of your partner because your let's say your biology, your animal, believes that it's already fulfilled its purpose. So why is it going to bother impregnating this woman again and again, year after year after year after year? It doesn't make sense to your biology. However, if you start to sprinkle in Kareza, pair bonding, where the objective is not on that end goal, you start to build a relationship predicated on those factors, on pair bonding, on longevity, on monogamy. So there's definitely something, if you're listening to this and you wish to have a long-term monogamous relationship with your girlfriend, with your wife, but you're worried, and you should be worried about those long-term statistics because they're not in our favor. There's a wonderful book called Cupid's Poisoned Arrow by Marina Robinson, which goes into depth about this idea, and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I think, I'm just thinking into minds of some men who might be listening to this, and I hear them kind of having this subtle little freak out. So you're saying, Joseph, that I should be having sex with my wife, with my girlfriend, with my partner, but I'm not allowed to come. What's the point? And I think we've explained that. But you're saying it is possible to achieve that, to where you can have that connection and have that, I should say, sexual fulfillment in that connection.
Yeah.
And to have it not be based around coming.
Exactly that. I mean, it's not, again, you know, I understand that there could be some pushback to the idea. I mean, gosh, I mean, when you look at the kind of, let's say, health recommendations of the 21st century, no fast food, no pizzas, no burgers. Everybody should fast now, and now we're not allowed to ejaculate. What's the point?
Yeah.
I get
taking
it.
all
I
the
get
fun
the
away.
argument.
Right.
Yeah. This isn't the idea that the gratification of the sexual experience is purely based on orgasm is nonsensical. It's Carezza is a very pleasurable long-term experience. It lasts far longer. It lasts, you know, an hour, 2 hours at a time. You're going much more at a slow pace, and you're more focused on the subtle nuances in your partner. In terms of, I would err on the side of using it as an intermittent practice. And I don't believe, you know, I'm not fully, again, convinced of this idea, but I do believe that there is a lot of evidence to suggest that long term it's not conducive to a long-term monogamous relationship, experiencing those huge spikes in dopamine. And there are many accounts of the particular lady who did the who wrote the particular book I'm referring to, and it's funny. It's littered with again accounts of individuals that she's spoken to, and again men who are skeptical of not doing this practice, and their reaction is the same as the one that you've just posed. But once you begin to rewire your neurology to act in a way that preserves joy over, you know, high pleasure, you can function closer to a homeostasis. You don't get those huge lulls of depression after that experience. Your mood swings are much more stable. I've forgotten your question now.
Well, no, and I think you talk about it becoming a more intimate act in that pair bonding. Yeah, I think that's important, especially for men who struggle with porn addiction, because a lot of times that intimacy is really the driving factor behind the porn addiction.
Yes.
You know, they're not really seeking out the sex, they're seeking intimacy.
Yeah.
So when you can have that connection, that's really what we need, that connection, that love, that acceptance, that someone that accepts you as being good enough, that wants you and has desire for you. I think that's what most men are really craving, and they're going the cheap route with porn. And not just porn, hookups too. You had a tweet a few days ago, and I'm paraphrasing here, but basically you said that, you know, the hookups and the casual sex and everything that so many people seem to be involved in today isn't really sex. It isn't really making love. You're basically just masturbating into a woman.
Yeah. Hookup culture, Tinder, you're just using somebody else's body to masturbate with. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you want to lay it out objectively and rationally, what are you doing when you're going on websites like Tinder and Hinge? You're looking for gratification. You're looking for immediate pleasure. You're looking for a more visceral and real and heightened form of masturbation, ultimately.
Right.
Let's not get away from the facts here. Even in these, you know, very coy terms like, oh, I'm just here for a little bit of fun. I'm not looking for anything serious. You're just looking for somebody else's. You looking to use somebody else's body to masturbate with.
Right.
Is what you're doing. Right. But that is, as you've rightly said, behind the idea or the idea that we haven't faced in ourselves, that what we're actually missing is intimacy.
Yeah. So when we realize that we're letting these emotions control us, and then we learn not to let those emotions become part of our identity, and we don't try to escape from them. We can face them. We can realize that what we're craving in this sexuality is really this intimacy, this pair bonding, like you talk. And you can have these practices where you bond more with your partner instead of just using them to, like you say, to masturbate into. So now that we can do all that, that we can have some sort of control over our emotions, retain this energy, this sexual energy that you talk about. Now we have all this energy we can use. Basically, you have capital that you can apply to other places. Now, one thing you also help men with is not just overcoming the porn addiction, overcoming those sort of things, but also taking that energy and building it into something positive, whether it be relationships or finding a good partner, a long-term relationship with a woman, or even in business and finance. So talk about how you help men with that, and what is involved with that, of taking that energy and transmuting it into these positive things.
Perfect, definitely. Well, I think first and foremost, I'm kind of working on my next project at the moment, which is this idea of digital real estate. So one of I suppose the best way to kind of convey the idea is it's a progression of how I started on the online space, and taking all the mistakes I made and presenting in a more practical and pragmatic way for anyone who wants to kind of follow in similar footsteps. But one of the main things that my clients and I talk about is what they're currently working on in terms of business aspirations. Usually they're younger, well, I wouldn't say all younger, but between the ages of kind of 20 and 30. And they want to start something from themselves. They're very entrepreneurial in their attitudes, which is great. But I am not against the 9 to 5, as contrary to many online creators and personalities would say. I mean, if you like your 9 to 5, I really believe that you can take some of that energy that you would otherwise be using to pleasure yourself needlessly to, and start thinking about, well, what value am I actually bringing to the table in my current occupation? How can I present that in a way to my employer and leverage that to a higher salary, to a better position, more responsibilities, and think about fundamentally, how is my organization impacting the particular niche I'm in? If it's something like hospitality, or if it's something like education, how I'm actually bringing value and affecting that particular organization. And can I do it better? Maybe these are where the seeds of entrepreneurial attitudes start happening. And it's almost disheartening to hear, because rarely any of my clients hear that kind of approach to how they can start making a considerable amount of money online. They think about the big high-end ticket skills like sales or marketing, which is good, but it's not for everybody. It really isn't. And I try to lend other goals in mind, like spiritual development, maybe raising a family, maybe more suited to that particular individual. It really depends on the client's temperament as well, their personality, to how I would, let's say, invite them to consider certain different paths. But it's really about allocating that extra time to something that they feel is more in line with who they would like to become. That's typically the question I ask my clients when they are, let's say, handled that particular part of their life and they're looking to broaden their avenues, is what does the best version of you look like? Who does the person you'd like to become look like? What is his day to day? What does he wake up in the morning and do? Does he work from home? Does he go out to his 9 to 5? Does he even live here? Is he island hopping or something like that? And then breaking that down into concise and practical steps for them to take action on, so they don't get paralyzed by the choices. I like to say, as a coach, I'm I'm used more as accountability than anything else, so they don't disappoint me.
Sure. Yeah,
and
me
they
too.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really think I really think that's probably the I mean, obviously with our experiences and the value that we can lend, but you know, I try to check in regularly and make sure
Mhm.
that if people feel like they're tempted to misstep, that they have the knowledge that they will have to be getting on a call with me, and potentially that's not an ideal situation for themselves.
Right. Accountability is so important. That's probably honestly the most important thing when it comes to quitting porn and kind of harnessing your sexual desire. Having that accountability and someone that can check up on you and you can be open with and honest with and build that relationship with. And it's so important to have something to focus on and to direct that energy into, because we've wasted all this time for years with porn, with sex, with everything. And it's so easy. It's not just quitting that. I mean, that's only half the job. You know, yes, we should celebrate men like you and I that have recovered from porn addiction, and the men that you and I have helped. We want to celebrate them overcoming that. But honestly, that's really just getting back to baseline.
It really is. Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
really just celebrating something you should have never done in the first place.
Yeah.
So it has to become a positive thing, because what too often happens is men quit porn and they just jump into something else to fill it. They jump into booze, they jump into, any sort of other drugs, or, there's some sort of addiction substitution there, because they don't have anything to direct all that energy that they now have into. So being able to put that energy into a business, into your family, into getting in shape, into finding your mission and purpose in life.
It can be very
key.
overwhelming. Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be very overwhelming. Like I mean the main kind of focal point I kind of address is more on the semen retention part of it. Of course, that's probably, I mean, it's a difficult road to travel, but the rewards and the fruits of that are, I mean, there's no limit to that. And it's funny you say, having that extra energy and, being mindful about where you place it. Some of my clients can't sleep because they have too much energy. They wake, they say, Joseph, I was, ready to get out of bed, like jump out of bed at 5 a.m. What do I do with that? And it can be so volatile because it's not something that people have a lot of experience with. And then I'm saying that's why you have to incorporate so many healthy habits alongside of that. Exactly as you said, it's not enough to just quit porn and think that your life is going to reorient on a good course. You have to transmute it into exercise, into reading, into education, into those self-reflective practices, into your spiritual development. Because if you don't, it can lead you into, again, those areas where narcotics and alcohol and other bad habits lie. So take that opportunity and really funnel it into something. And the transformations that you can achieve in 6 months are incredible when you can do that.
And that's probably why so many men relapse with porn addiction. Yeah. Because they didn't direct that energy somewhere else. Yeah. There's just this hole and there's nothing to fill that void. And so they eventually can't help themselves and go back to it.
Definitely. That's I think I think from a marketing perspective, I try to push as much as I can, is that, as I couldn't say it better than you, is that it's not enough to just quit. What do you then do with that energy? You have to push it into something creative, or it's like fire. It's like hot fire. You need to be able to put that fuel into something else.
Right. One comment that you had that I thought was great, and I'd like you to explain it a little bit. You said pornography is the cigarettes of our generation. What do you mean by that?
Well, there's this very insipid narrative that pornography is not as detrimental as the common man would currently believe. And if you look at the marketing of cigarettes, even 50 years ago, I've seen doctors' own brand cigarettes.
Yeah.
And you can find those on the internet now. You could look them up. But I believe in the next 100 years, we're going to look back with the same disdain as we did for cigarettes as we do pornography. Really good book to read is Your Brain on Porn by Gary
Yes.
Wilson. I don't know if you've read that book.
I have.
But one of the main takeaways from that book is that if you scan the brains of somebody watching porn and somebody doing class A drugs like heroin, cocaine, there is no difference to the the neurology happening there. And then you can start going down, really dark mental routes by saying, if pornography has the same effects, the same effects on the brain chemistry as these class A drugs, and kids as young as 11 or 12 are walking around with phones in their pockets with access to that kind of material, it's the equivalent to them walking around with cocaine and heroin in their pocket. How
Right.
you feel as a parent? Can you sleep soundly at night knowing that they can have access to that? Another thing I say is quitting porn is like trying to quit cigarettes, but you've always got a cigarette in your pocket. The accessibility is ridiculous.
Absolutely.
And there has to be, in my personal opinion, so much more security around having access to that kind of material when you realize the changes in brain chemistry that it can orient. It's not natural. This is not something that has happened over 1,000 years. It's happened in 20 years. We're not mature enough to deal with that. And that's why you're seeing so much addiction now, and people can't function in relationships. And the idea that porn has nothing to do with it is so naive. It's almost criminal. So, we need to have a real serious conversation about it. But everyone's scared to. I think
Sure.
me and you and
Yeah.
only a handful of other men have the balls to even talk about the subject matter, because it's so sensitive, and it to the. I mean, I empathize with it because I was once that man who said, "What are you talking about? It's harmless. It's just a little bit of pleasure that I'm getting to help me go to sleep or whatever." But when you actually deep it and you actually start to look objectively at it, it's how can you not say it's got any ramifications, some serious ramifications on us? So that's my opinion. 100 years, we're going to look back and think, what have we done? What did we allow to happen?
Yeah. And that's, we'll see the consequences of it eventually. Right now, I think we're in this period where people are trying to justify it. Like you say, they tried to justify cigarettes in the 50s and the 60s. That we're eventually at some point, we're going to realize the damage we've done to our culture and our society. And as you say, our children. A lot of the men that I coach were first first exposed at 9-10 years old.
Yeah.
So you're making headway in that with what you do. I congratulate you for that. We're on the same mission together. And so I want to ask you too, I want to give you the floor here before we close out here. But if there's a guy out there listening to this, and this is hitting them in the heart, and they're sitting there and I'm struggling with porn addiction. I'm struggling with this. I'm letting out all my energy. I have no energy. I have no drive. I have no purpose. And all this is resonating with them. What do you say to them? What can they do? How do they get started?
Cool. You've got a difficult client to approach. Okay. What do they do? Well, the first thing I would say is don't expect it to happen, overnight. I mean, we have to be very, very realistic in our approaches to something like this. I'm trying to maybe pitch this in terms of where I was about 5 years ago, and the things that helped me were really doing the small things that you feel are almost so small that they will give you no progress. Is, can you write a page a day or a paragraph before you go to bed about how your day went, where your emotions are, where your energy is at, and start to cultivate that journaling habit, that self-reflective habit? If you really don't like writing, you can try something like meditation. But I think writing is so much more practical, and the idea isn't as esoteric as something like meditation or qigong or tai chi to the average Westerner. So journaling really is going to be your in to the average person, I would say. And I don't mean that to say in a bad way. I still journal every single day. I have to. It's become part of my routine that I never allow myself to miss a couple of days in routine. So get a self-reflective practice immediately. If it's not journaling, you can do meditation. You can even do exercise, but don't take headphones to the gym. That's your time alone. That's your time to be with your body, communicate with your body. Where am I at? One of the things I say about these self-reflective habits is, you wake up in the morning, you might ask your partner how she's doing or he's doing, or you might text your friend how they're doing. You might text your family, how are they doing? Do you ever sit down in the morning and ask yourself how you're doing, where you're at, how you're feeling? You can't do these things mentally. It's too nebulous. It's too non-tangible. You have to have a conduit to allow yourself the space to have that open dialogue with yourself. So journaling is an invaluable tool that I believe you can start building really, really good habits around. I would say screen your environment as well. Take a little log about what you're doing of every hour in the day. Review it almost like a food diary, and just say to yourself, right, from 9 o'clock till 12 o'clock, I was just scrolling, watching YouTube and TikTok videos. Look at that objectively. What is that saying to you? Is that a good use of your time? Or is it something that you're using as a coping mechanism to avoid maybe doing something a little bit more productive? You have to evaluate yourself, and you have to be objective about it. If you're not being brutally honest with yourself, nobody else will, because they're scared. And if they're not being brutally honest with you, you probably scared them off that. And not that, as we were saying at the beginning of this dialogue, the hardest clients to work with, or the hardest people to, let's say, make them more open to change, is the ones that keep telling themselves the self-defeating story again and again and again and again and again. And you'll come to realize, if not now, but better to learn this now or eventually, is you hold the pen to write your own story. And that is 100% true, regardless of what anybody else tells you. So you have to start telling yourself better stories. You have to be more optimistic. And reading as well. I mean, I could talk about all these habits. If I had to lift them off: read, meditate, exercise, fast. Don't jerk off. Don't jerk off. I probably missed a couple. Running. Hey, if you're doing those 6, you're going to be on a very, very good way. But yeah, start small, start with journaling, and the rest will fall into place.
Awesome. Well, this has been a great discussion, Joseph. I appreciate you joining me. If people wanted to learn more about you and what you do and find your programs, where can they go to find that?
Cool. Well, thank you very much for having me, Tim. It's been excellent sharing this platform with you, and we're on to a very noble and divine mission here, and I think we're getting a lot of attention. If you want to find my personal tweets, my personal videos around the subject matter, you can find me on Twitter or YouTube at Masculine Theory. You can enjoy listening to some of my rhetoric around sexual energy and transmutation and self-actualization and meditations.
Great. Well, Joseph, thanks for joining us today again. Really appreciate it. Love what you do and wish you the best.
Thank you very much, Timothy. Thank you again.
This has been an episode of the Into the Wilderness podcast. This is Timothy Regal. Thank you for listening. For additional content and to learn more about Into the Wilderness, visit www.intothewildernessblog.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and all other social media at Timothy Regal. TimothyReigle. If you're like me and many other men, you've struggled with porn. I was addicted for over 15 years and thought I would never break free. But through accountability, hard work, and never giving up, I found freedom from porn and sex addiction. If you're fighting the same battle, know there is hope. You can defeat this, but you cannot do it alone. That's why I offer one-on-one coaching to walk beside you in your battle. I'll provide personal guidance, support, and encouragement, and most importantly, accountability to keep you on track and help you reach your goals. So if you're ready to finally quit porn for good, if you're ready to put in the hard work, and if you're ready to finally take control of your life back, click on the link in the show notes to go to www.intothewildernessblog.com or DM me on Twitter or other social media to get started in your path to freedom today.